Today, candidates are in the final stretch of a critical off-year campaign season, and they're pulling out all the stops. In New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill has some big names joining her on the trail. Barack Obama on Saturday, and this morning, Pete Buttigieg.
This state needs a governor who can think for herself. The other candidate has demonstrated that he is fine with New Jersey getting hurt as long as that's what the president tells him to say. In a few days, voters get to send a strong message by electing a governor who takes her cues from the people of New Jersey, not orders from the White House.
Then you have the race for New York City mayor, and the man who served in that office for a dozen years, billionaire Mike Bloomberg, has just infused $1.5 million into an 11th hour push for Andrew Cuomo's campaign. He's been trailing Zohran Mamdani in the polls. Those are two races that could help answer the key questions about Democrats posed by New York Magazine. Is the future Mamdani a movement politician fluent in social media who commands the attention of both his faithful and his detractors? Or is it Sherrill, who has the sort of resume and mainstream credentials that establishment Democrats have long thought is the key to winning over voters skeptical of their party? Let's bring in Mark Leibovich, a staff writer for The Atlantic and an MSNBC political contributor. Julie Roginski is here with me, a Democratic strategist and author of the Salty Politics newsletter on Substack. So, Julie, do you think either of these two candidates is kind of the signal for the future of the Democratic Party?
No, I think they're both very specific to the places where they're running, and I've done a lot of work in both those places. And I can start with New York first. Look, Mamdani is a change from everything we've ever seen in New York. He is somebody who's a unicorn candidate. He has captured the imagination of young voters and other voters who typically don't vote in these kinds of elections. But he's kind of created a movement. Sherrill is running to be a third term to succeed a Democratic governor. That has not been that's never been done in New Jersey in my lifetime. I think 1963 was the last time you had a candidate of the same party succeed a two-term governor of the same party. If she wins, it will be because New Jersey hates Donald Trump. It is a total anti-Trump vote, and because her opponent has leaned into MAGA in ways that, frankly, I think is a little unexpected. And so I don't know that this is a signal for the rest of the country. I think there are people who are incredibly unique to the circumstances that they're in. I think that if Sherrill wins, it'll be an incredible sign for what to expect next year for Democrats, because, again, she should not win based on history. And Mamdani, I think, is somebody who is, if you could create a Zohran Mamdani and put him into every congressional district for Democrats, not necessarily his policies, but his charisma and his ability to communicate, I think Democrats would be thrilled.
So, Mark, the folks campaigning with each of these candidates got to represent their brands, right? Mikey Sherrill has been joined by the establishment Democrats, Josh Shapiro, Mark Kelly, Pete Buttigieg, Barack Obama, obviously, this weekend. While Mamdani welcomed the party's left-wing stars, Bernie Sanders, AOC. They were at a big rally for him. The latest poll out just this morning has the Sherrill Citarelli race as a dead heat. There was another poll a week ago that was also within the margin of error. So they're basically saying the same thing. Can last-minute pushes like these make a difference?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, that's a pretty close race for Mikey Sherrill. I mean, I think a lot of people, at least a few months ago, thought this was going to be a bit of an easier race for her, given the state of Donald Trump. And I think, I think she hasn't had a great campaign, to be honest with you. I think New York, I think you make a good point. I mean, the bifurcation between the kind of energy, but also the kind of politics you see, the politicians you see campaigning for Mamdani compared to what you're seeing in New Jersey and Virginia really is telling of the divide in the Democratic Party. I mean, if you go anywhere in the country, AOC, Bernie Sanders, and Mamdani are people who are going to blow out arenas. I mean, obviously, Mamdani hasn't been out in the country much, but this is where the energy is. I mean, there's a lot of excitement there. But obviously, these people have not been elected anywhere outside of, New York and Vermont, right? So yeah. I think in this case, I do think there's bit of a danger to look too deeply into the New Jersey and Virginia and New York races during the off years, because I think if you look what happened 4 years ago, Phil Murphy in New Jersey underperformed a bit. Republicans won the governor's mansion in Virginia. And then, the midterm the next year was surprisingly very strong for Democrats. So I don't know. I think you can take a lot of it for a grain of salt. And I think a lot of it's about the candidates in the individual states. But I guess it'll be fascinating.
Well, the other fascinating thing is going to be whether $1.5 million. There's a lot of people, frankly, if you just go out in New York, who, for probably no reason, maybe they talk to their friends, have this sense that the race for mayor is tighter than the polls suggest it is. Can $1.5 million in the closing days, when people have already voted in some level, make a difference?
I mean, I don't want to sound like Dr. Evil, but $1.5 million is really not a lot of money, especially in the New York market. It's just not. And good for Mike Bloomberg for chipping in. He could probably have done more if he really wanted to move the needle there, because $1.5 million is pretty token in a city like New York, where communication is more expensive than anywhere else. I'll say this about Mikey Sherrill. I've done a lot of work in New Jersey over the last 30 years. She should not, it's not her, a Democrat should not win this year. If you look at history in New Jersey, Democrats have controlled the legislature and the governor's mansion for 8 years. There's an affordability crisis across the country, including in New Jersey. So the very fact that she actually is competitive and potentially favored to win is a huge prop, I think, to her, but I think also a good sign for Democrats, because she is running against Trump. She really has nothing else to run. She can't run against her own party in New Jersey, which has caused, in some people's eyes, this affordability crisis. So she has to blame it on Trump. And if she's successful in doing that, I think actually she'll be able to pull it out. For Mamdani, if you think about it, he's also running on affordability. They're running on the same issues. There's really not much daylight between the issues they're running on. The difference is how they're running. She's running a very cautious, very conservative campaign. He is running a campaign that is inflaming people on both sides of the aisle, and in some ways bringing people to the polls that are voting for him who never voted, but also voting against him who've never voted because they think he's a threat. So it remains to be seen what happens for both these races.
We always say this, the most important thing, right, is, Mark, turnout, and then turnout. Off election years like this is tend to be a little bit of a struggle to get people to come out, although these have been very high profile and ridiculous. All right, that's a word I shouldn't use. Extraordinary amount of money has been spent on some of these races. I wonder if there's a sense that Mamdani hasn't won, for example. Could that result in lower turnout? What are you going to be watching for in this turnout race?
You mean in the New York piece? I mean,
in New York, and I think in Mikey Sherrill's situation as well.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways they're linked, because, I mean, like, the better part of New Jersey is in the New York media market. Yeah, so they are actually, a lot of their views of Democrats and Democratic policy is going to be defined by what they see going on in New York and Mamdani himself. So he's not an insignificant figure in that election. Also, I think, look, I mean, I think Mamdani's supporters are extremely energized. I mean, I think his passion and the passion of his supporters have been the defining part of his campaign. So I think by definition, they will be very likely to come out to vote. The question is there a hidden Cuomo vote somewhere? Are there people who are sort of quietly hoping he wins or willing to vote for him, but not really comfortable talking to their extremely progressive neighbors in, Brooklyn or Manhattan or something like that to say that they're actually thinking about voting for him? Curtis Sliwa, the Republican in the race, is obviously a huge spoiler here. If he were to get out, it would be a much closer race, and I think a lot more interesting. It does look like, at least from reading polls, that Mamdani has enough of a cushion to maybe absorb that. But obviously, we'll see.
Mark Leibovich, Julie Roginski, thank you both. And be sure to tune in next Tuesday, November 4th, for MSNBC's election.